Okay, I'm going to call our meeting to order. Today is January 23rd, 2018, and this is a business meeting of the North Kingstown School Committee. If I could have everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Madam Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Mr. Glassbach?
Here.
Mrs. Hoskins? Here. Mr. Jones?
Here.
Mrs. McGoffin?
Here.
Mrs. Stevens?
Here.
Mrs. Schott?
Here.
And student representatives.
Studying.
That's right, it's midterms.
Well, they should be.
Good.
Midterms.
And if you could please call the calendar.
Monday, January 29th, there'll be a CLAC meeting at 6:30 p.m. at Davisville Academy. Tuesday, February 6th, there'll be a school committee budget meeting. Tuesday, February 13th, there's a school committee business meeting. And Tuesday, February 20th, there'll be a school committee budget meeting.
And thank you. And Dr. Shea, do you have any presentations or recognitions this evening?
Yes, I'd like to start off with congratulating Paula Chabon. I believe that's on WJAR this evening.
On Thursday.
Thursday evening, you're right. Yeah. So on Thursday, you'll be able to see on WJAR 10 the Golden Apple Award with Patrice Wood. NK has been very fortunate to get a number of these. And Paula Chabon is a Portuguese teacher at North Kingstown High School. And she's obviously had quite an impact on our students. It was a really, really nice ceremony, one of the nicest I've been to. So it's really worth tuning in if you get a chance, and I would imagine it'll be on their webpage after Thursday as well. So.
Thank you. Any others?
Yes, I have a bunch. Boy, we should be very happy. I hope I say these names correctly, or at least close. So, student awards. Congratulations to the following, as they were named Providence Journal All-State Selections. I'm sure some people were able to catch them in the paper. Joe Gilmartin, Zach Pezza, and Dylan Poria as first-team All-State Selections, and Ryan Maloney as a second-team All-State Selection, and that was football. For field hockey, we have Dempsey Campbell and Kate Vieira as first-team All-State Selections, and Annabelle Lee and Mackenzie Lennon as second-team All-State Selections. And now for volleyball, we have Lily Nunnery as second-team All-State, that's cross-country. And Brandy Thomas and Chloe Kerr, I believe, is the first-team All-State, and Jamie Harrington named to the second-team All-State in girls volleyball. Zach Cook as first-team All-State, and Travis Atwood as second-team All-State in boys soccer. Brinley Shabbat as first-team All-Soccer for girls soccer. 5 of our students received silver keys at the Scholastic Art Awards. They are Dina Fanon, Kelsey Cooper, Michaela Colonese, Nathan Tellier, and Kaylin Froberg. And other student awards, congratulations to Michaela Young, Junge, and Audrey Ropp, both grade 9, for winning the first LEGO League Championship at Roger Williams University. Their team, the Robo Wolves, will be moving on to the World Festival this spring in Detroit.
Thank you very much. Anything else? Okay, next item on the agenda are citizens' comments. I have a number of people called up to speak. For each of you, to just remind you, we ask that you please, per our policy, limit your comments to 3 minutes. And when you get to the microphone, if you'd please speak your name and your address. First person is Joseph Baker.
Good evening. My name is Joe Baker. I live at 209 Edmund Drive in North Kingstown. Good evening, Dr. Auger and members of the school committee. When I stood here before you 2 weeks ago, I requested that the committee take the appropriate actions to include additional behavioral support for Quinnesset Elementary in the FY 2019 budget. I stand here tonight seeking your response and to reinforce my original request. While it is comforting to know that some of you hear us, only your actions will illustrate if you are listening to the concerns and demands of the taxpayers and those who have elected you to these positions. The requests that we make are not wants, these are needs. Students need adequate support to succeed. Students need to be safe and feel safe while attending class. It is nice to have a budget that can be recognized by an industry group as meritorious. It is nice to have luxurious offices for the school department administration. It is nice to have better start times or an improved track and field complex. Every student being safe at school is a must-have. Every student receiving the proper amount of attention is a must-have. Ensuring that every child in Quinnesset Elementary knows that they are valued as much as any student elsewhere in the school district is a must-have. It seems that the priorities of this committee and this town, while well-intentioned, are missing the root issues which could lead to better conditions for every student, resident, and taxpayer. I hope that this group recognizes that preparing a budget and submitting it for recognition and awards, while children in the school system are not receiving the basic level of services they deserve, nor are safe in their classrooms, is disingenuous at best. I anxiously await seeing the FY 2019 proposed budget to see how this committee and administration plan to address these issues. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is, I think it's Amy McCoyle. Sorry.
Good evening, everyone. My name's Amy McCoyle. I live at 5 Adelina Drive, and my 2 children attend Quinnesset Elementary School. I'm here to make you aware of the current situation at Quid. There's a lack of behavioral support, which is hindering the education and safety of our children. The school's talented and dedicated teachers are being taken away from their lesson plans to handle these disruptions. The paraprofessionals are taxed with one-on-one care as opposed to helping the whole class. Our school has lost skilled teachers and good role model students to other districts, schools, and charter schools because of these behavior issues. Please
Hi, my name is Kathleen Layton, and I have 2 children at Quinnesset Elementary School. And
Next, Carrie Pedro.
good evening, my name is Carrie Pedro. I live at 64 Mesa Drive in North Kingstown. My daughter is a kindergartner at Quinnesset Elementary School. Since she has begun her tenure in the school system, she has reported to me numerous behavioral interruptions for her school day, and personally has been involved in interactions with students, least of all in an aggressive act where she was spit in the face by another student. And I would like to compliment the teaching and paraprofessional staff at Quinnesset School, who has professionally and appropriately handled these situations and should be applauded and commended for the hard work they do intervening in these circumstances. But the reality is it is taking away time from their priority and the priority of the children academically, and also, just to reinforce the values of what we all believe in here in North Kingstown, North Kingstown cares. So I would also like to reinforce the idea that there should be some consideration about bringing on some sort of dean of culture or another real meaningful behavioral plan put into place. And I'm hopeful that this committee will engage in thoughtful discussion with upper administration, with the teachers and their association, and with the parents who are here and representing the community that we are here because we believe in. So thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Becca Baker.
can I move this?
You can.
Rebecca Baker, 209 Edmund Drive, North Kingstown. All right. Good evening, Dr. Rozier and school committee members. My name is Rebecca Baker. At the last meeting, you heard my husband speak about some of the atrocities that are occurring at the Quinnesset Elementary School.
And while yes, all of those things are true, I'd like to speak to you from a different angle. I spend quite a bit of my time volunteering at the school. I do walking club. I help out with reading groups in the first grade. I've also done the after-school Lego program, and whether it's PTO or the family center, I pretty much help out as much as I can. So I have had the opportunity and the privilege to get to know many of the students at QUID. And there's this one little fellow who comes to the walking club and holds my hand tightly as we walk around, and each time a fallen leaf catches his eye, he stops and picks it up and gives it to me like a little gift. All the while we're talking about his family and sports and music and stuff, and then when the lunch bell rings, we have to stay together and hold hands all the way to the door to line up for lunch. But then, if I'm still there, which often I am, I'll see this little fellow, and he's not always making the best behavior choices. And that's a common thread at the Quidnesset School. The students at QUID are smart, they're creative, they're funny, and good. But so many of them are misguided. Yes, even the student that did what he did to my child is a very sweet kid. But he's so misguided. And he's only getting older. And the more parents and former students that I talk to, the more I realize that the Quidnesset School stands united, and you are not just failing some of the students at QUID, you are failing all of the students at QUID by not giving them the support that they need. We would like for a full-time dean of students to be added to the budget for the Quidnesset School and any other behavior supports that they or other schools in the district might need in the future. On another note, Mrs. McGovern, I called you and left a message, and you didn't call me back. I emailed you with some questions, and you sent back a curt email. You are an elected official, and I, as a parent and taxpayer, reached out to you for support and help. And not only did you not help me, but you made me feel like I did something wrong, and you are up for re-election next term, and you will not be getting my vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Julie Taylor?
Hi, my name is Julie Taylor. I live at 96 Hornet Road. I too have two children that are at Quidnesset Elementary. So they've been there for one for 2 years, and I volunteer a lot at the school. And I just wanted to say that I think that Quidnesset will benefit from a behavioral specialist. It is really hard in that school, and it is unusual to be in that school so often, just as a parent, but to see so much violence, and it's weird. I went to school as you all did, and school isn't like that for me, and I'm surprised that it's like that at that school. All right, thanks.
Thank you. And Andrew Thompson?
Hi, my name is Andrew Thompson. I live at 81 Candlewood Drive. And I'd just like to echo a lot of the sentiments that these parents have expressed. My wife volunteers with some of these people, and she tells me what she sees at the school. I have a daughter in the 5th grade, and she's generally had a good experience, but there have definitely been issues there that aren't normal for a school, and I really think that it does need attention. So I hope it gets your serious attention going forward, that it's a school that needs attention and it's not behaving in a normal way. So thank you, and hope you can figure something out that will help the students and these concerned parents as well.
Thank you. That's the last person who signed up to speak. Is there anyone else who didn't sign up? You can still come to the microphone if you'd like to. Thank you. Next, we're on to our routine items. So if I could first have a motion to seal the executive session minutes of January 23rd, 2018. That was a clear tie, but we'll say a motion by Ms. Hoskins, second Ms. McGovern. All those in favor? Aye. Next, I can disclose that there were no votes taken in the executive session this evening. One thing I'd ask is if we could, by unanimous consent, move one item up a little bit so that we can have any questions answered from someone who's in the audience who needs to get home before we reach it otherwise. And that's our policy D1 on unfinished business, so 4D1, which is the meal payment policy. So if I could have unanimous consent to bring that one forward for consideration now. I don't think I need a motion, we can say unanimous consent. So as long as no one objects, we'll take that one now. So first, if I could ask for discussion purposes anyway, a motion to approve policy EF1 for meal payments.
So moved. Second.
Oh, we aren't gonna vote yet, so, discussion. I know that Ms. Stevens, you had some questions with respect to that, and I think we have.
So we have Trish Cawley here. Trish is our food service supervisor. So we asked her if she could please be here tonight to answer any questions that you had, either to help you vote on the policy or if you needed more information. So thank you very much, Trish.
Yes, thank you for coming, and thank you for the information that you provided earlier this week, or last week, I think it was. I have a question, and I'm not sure you have the answer, kind of related to the information that we get from RIDE.
Yes.
So I know that we get some information, on the information goes to families who are free and reduced lunch. And they can, submit a form or a letter to us saying that they qualify for free and reduced lunches. And they choose not to in some cases, and so, we're not able to apply that benefit. Do you know if RIDE is aware of those students who, could we show RIDE evidence saying that, yes, these students are enrolled in our school, can we apply the benefit, even if the students or the parents choose not to give that letter to us?
Yes, the information we get monthly, and it's uploaded into our system. And then, so they're automatically free for breakfast and for lunch. Anyone who's on that, it's called electronic direct certification. So if anybody's in the human, state aid for human services, that's the information that we get. And so they don't have to supply a letter or apply in any way. And they also receive a letter at their household saying that they qualify for the benefit.
Okay.
So it's a monthly upload of information.
Yeah, I think, and first of all, thanks for coming.
Of course.
Thanks to Ms. Stevens, who asked a lot of questions of RIDE stuff, and so it was quite informative to learn some of the things. I think maybe to follow up what she said is, the point that I guess the official at RIDE made, which is, Health and Human Services provides a letter when they get SNAP benefits, which may thing, which RIDE knows they're eligible, but won't direct certify that, right? I mean, their comment they made was they won't release those letters names to the districts, nor will they take the time to match it against the census to say, it's an address in North Kingstown, let me go look at the census file to see if it's a North Kingstown student. They're sort of putting the onus back on the district
Right.
or the parent. And I guess here's where it's an interesting discussion, because it was touched on this a little bit in citizens' comments, about the parental role in some of these things. I've never, been fortunate enough or not been in a position when I have kids in school of being eligible for those benefits. But it's hard to understand a parent who won't take advantage of a benefit for their child. And I mean, that's at the heart of what we're going to be talking about later, is that kind of responsibility and the burden being placed on the child. And so I guess to elucidate, is there any way we can end run the system? And my second question is the 30-day window when we know with the carryover,
Yes.
right, from school year to school year.
Correct.
Can you give some insight into why parents don't take advantage of it within the 30 days?
I cannot give you any insight, but I can tell you the facts that prior to, we get uploaded, it was like September 8th, the RIDE sent us information. All that got uploaded into the system. Like any database, it's, it fluctuates a little bit here and there. Prior to the 30-day, we send letters out to all the households telling them that there is a window to their previous application and that they need to either go online. Our online application, not all districts have it, but it's so easy, it's so user-friendly. They can do it online, or they can fill out an application. Now, in some cases, when we get the information from RIDE, there may be a family that moved into North Kingstown, like a couple of days after our monthly report from last month. And in a case like that, they may come in and they're like, well, we were free. So then we would say that just bring in the letter that the Department of Human Services provided for you. We're on a learning curve here, and we're at the very ground level. That's why the USDA, decided that we had to have policies across the whole country because it's a cultural thing. So when we have these students we have free students who are free now, but do have balances. But those young families have now learned the system. It isn't something that went on 5 years ago. So the insight piece I can't answer to. But I look at it like, we have 40 students who are now free but have balances. But those 40 students now know the system, and they're in the system.
So I guess, Trish, one of the questions really kind of is, if there's anything we can come up with to close that gap on that balance before they're eligible. Because there is going to be, it sounds like, a time frame in which the paperwork needs to catch up when people move districts, and somebody's gonna be out of luck, and it could be for 30 days, like depending on when somebody actually transfers.
Well, I think part of this policy with the 5 meal, if you're in rears for 5 meals, and then you're gonna be getting, which is always our 4th choice for all the schools, which is Sunny Butter lunch, that triggers that parent to go, I am free, where's that letter? So that's 40 students who before were just getting meals and weren't in the system. So I think because it's a brand new policy for all of us, it's going to become, they're gonna learn it, and they're gonna know how it is, and all these families now, they already know, okay, I am free. Wow, I do have to dig that paper up, or I do have to put that in, because there's gonna be, there's gonna be a situation at the school level where my child may not be happy for a day. So it has changed behavior on the households.
So you think, because the bulk of these were at the elementary schools, and the
Yes.
majority is at Quinnesset.
Correct.
So you think going forward, and I guess my concern is it learning for kindergarten or just learning across all different grades? If that was the case, then hopefully this kind of really goes away next year, unless it's a systemic thing about kindergartens or transfers.
No, it wasn't. I looked myself at the grade levels because I was looking for a pattern, and there really wasn't a pattern that they were all new into having a grade student. But what the difference is now is that our own accountability as an organization to pick up on that student who's just not paying and getting a meal every day. And so we're more proactive to addressing it and pinpointing it, and that's creating the change on the household level.
Trish, could you also talk a little bit about this, probably not the greatest terminology for it that I use, but like this marketing campaign of awareness of having families understand what they're eligible for and how they can apply. Could you explain that a little bit?
We have a marketing campaign which is going to be tying into Facebook and Instagram. The first thing is all the households are going to get it, and it's like it has like a thumbs down. It's like nobody likes to go without breakfast, and it's just going to be awareness. Do you know someone who could use the benefit? And it's called Feedable. It's going to have a separate email, and it's just going to give exposure to the benefit. We put it on the menu. Every household gets a pack at the beginning of the school year. It's on the menu monthly. We send home the letters, but we feel like we need to do more. And that's gonna be, it's just gonna explain the program, it's gonna explain the confidentiality of how the program works. I mean, you can't, there's no stigma to, no stigma, you know, I'm putting in a number, you're putting in a number, we're all putting in a number, or pushing a button. It's not like no one knows who has a meal benefit and doesn't, and the vast majority of the people don't pay cash anyway. So there's very, you know, they're paying online, so the stigma isn't there, but we still have a lot of, you know, a lot of needy children who may not necessarily be in the program, so we're gonna be trying to capture them, and that's going to go out in March.
Any other questions?
I guess my primary question is, I know there are some students who do attend school in North Kingstown that DHS or RIDE is aware that they do qualify for the benefit, and they've notified the parents, but they just haven't been matched for whatever reason. There's just a disconnect between the systems, and they won't share that information with the district.
Well, we do have all that information, and it does get pushed into our database. And even from last month's push to this month's push, there was only a difference of 6 students. So it's a little over 600 students that are in our, it's called NutriKids, in our NutriKids database.
Okay.
And it is updated monthly. Now, as far as RIDE talking about the confidentiality of it, it may be just that it goes to registration and to buy office, that sort of a thing. But what we do is it gets pushed into NutriKids, and it also gets pushed into Aspen, so that we can tell through Aspen what the state has as their eligibility.
I think Trish,
So
the
it's all
frustration,
current,
well, I think
yeah.
the frustration is that, I mean, if you're gonna get the name, then what's the difference of them sending a CC letter, of that letter, to the superintendent, so we skip the parent who, for whatever reason, can't retain the letter, get the letter to the school, right? I think that's the frustration,
They don't have
going
to
to get
bring in a
6
letter.
kids. Right, well then, why aren't they just
The
enrolled?
only people who would ever have to bring in a letter would be if I came into a district, if I moved into the district, and we were between the gap between the monthly report coming in.
So
No, but I
those
think-
6 kids will automatically be enrolled?
They are automatically enrolled.
No, but there are some students, I think, from the information that we got from RIDE,
Yeah.
there are some students that they don't know for sure that they attend North Kingstown.
Well, they may not attend public, you know, they may not attend North Kingstown Public Schools. I mean, just today, I ran into a situation where it's a family where the senior lives in Narragansett with her father, and the other one lives here in North Kingstown, but I'm actually looking at something that says a grade 12 name, but that person does not go here. So there is a little fluctuation to the data. There's also people who might have transferred out, they may be on the list, but every night, Aspen and NutriKids talk to each other and activate and deactivate students as needed.
So your feed comes from RIDE, correct?
It comes from the Department of,
DHS.
DHS.
It was my understanding that they have the match file and the unmatched file.
Yeah,
and
it
so
did
I'm
not
worried
sound that
about-
way the way Ryan explained it,
The
because I guess my
unmatched.
question would be is then, are those 6 kids new, or they've been in the district for 7 months?
They may have just qualified for benefits.
Okay,
The parent may have lost the job.
okay.
So it would be, they could have been here for years, and now all of a sudden, they're on the SNAP program. It's-
Okay, but they wouldn't really run into the issue unless, obviously, you're right, there's a gap, and the family's stressful situation means the child maybe hasn't been able to afford a lunch, but that should be picked up within, like you're saying, a month. So
Yes.
I guess and again, it's not you, I'm trying to, you know, September 8th, you know, school starts generally Labor Day, can't RIDE preload like the August data?
Well, that would be good.
I mean,
We're
I
always
guess the
looking
frustration
for
we're
it.
getting at is we're gonna debate a policy that seems, in
Well,
most cases,
first
we
of
can
all,
identify
Just
this.
to let you know, anyone from June 16th, June 20th, whatever it was, automatically is rolling over. So when we get those 9, when we got our EDC, it's called, when we got that first set of data, it's basically capturing a lot of our kindergartner, pre-K, that sort of thing, because the other students are already on it. So we may have had, let's just say we had 500 direct certified children in June. All right, we have our seniors graduate, our kindergartners come in. It still may be, you know, around the same number, but it's different names. But we're on top of, you know, whatever information we're getting from the state. It's a very short turnaround time.
I have no doubt, and I appreciate the effort that you and the district and the, you know, all the administration and staff do to ensure kids, you know, get the benefit. I guess a little bit of the frustration seems that, you know, so ultimately then it seems to me it's just like we get 40 kids, it's the parents' responsibility, and they just, I mean, we're contacting them, right? So, I mean, at some point the schools can't take over when parents fail.
We are contacting them, and I can actually see from the report if the message went on the machine, if they picked up off the machine, if it went to an email, if they opened the email, if it's been blocked. So the information's getting out there. And it's good to have a report then, because sometimes that's what I'll look at. I'll like, well, wait a minute, let's look at what, it's called School Messenger. Let's see what's going on, and I'll pull up, and it goes out every night. And I'll be like, okay, no, they're aware of it. But then I always reach out personally. Anyway, we always reach out prior to anything like this by telephone as well. So,
Any other questions? And I'll mention, I actually made a mistake earlier. This is the first read of the policy, so we would be approving it tonight regardless. So I'd ask that we actually withdraw the motion that was made, because we don't want to approve it tonight either way. With unanimous consent, unless anyone objects, we'll withdraw the motion to approve the policy, because it is just the first read. Any other questions or proposed changes to the policy on our first read? Okay. Thank you very much for coming tonight. So back to the agenda. Any members have any exemptions from the consent agenda? And I will have one, which is going to be policy D through, that's not consent, never mind. Any other exemptions to consent agenda? Hearing none, if I could have a motion to approve the consent agenda. I'll say a motion to Ms. Stevens, second to Ms. Hoskins. Any discussion on the consent agenda? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Next item is the school committee approval of the 2018-19 high school program of studies. We tabled this last week. I know Mr. Jones is continuing to work with the administration and the folks over at the high school to get some questions answered. Do you want to speak on? Sure, absolutely.
Okay. I know Dr. Morse is here and Dr. Mansieri as well, if you have any questions for them. But since we spoke last time and Dr. Morse talked about some of the changes in this year's program, we have also included that our middle school versions of Algebra 1 and Spanish 1 are being coordinated to ensure that they include the same curriculum and exams that take place at the high school. These students will now receive high school credit posted on their transcript for these courses. And these will be reflected in the middle school handbooks as well. Our fourth math requirement, this is something that goes back a few years, that the Department of Education has said that a minimum of 3 math, pure math classes should be taken. But a fourth math requirement would mean another course that's very rigorous in math and applies math should be taken by all students, if particularly if they don't take 4 years of math. So in North Kingstown, we had counted if you were to take physics, for instance, you could count it as a science or a math. Now we are going to count it for both of those. It will cover both of those. Doesn't mean you're taking fewer credits, but it does mean that you have a course that covers your requirement for that particular item. And this increases the student's ability then to take something other than math or science if they so wish. So it personalizes their program of study just that much more. The National Honor Society is not necessarily in the program of studies, but it is worth noting here that we are making the threshold for inclusion of the National Honor Society. We had probably the most rigorous threshold that I can think of, and the National Honor Society themselves allows for an area where students, I think it's like an 85 average or so, generally speaking, can be in, but North Kingstown was much higher than that. We have reduced that back, and we're similar to other very rigorous districts like Barrington in our program now. And we have included language that allows students to take more than 2 classes outside of the normal NKHS schedules, such as the Advanced Course Network, and for dual enrollment, with the permission of the assistant principal for teaching and learning. That already happens, but we're just putting it in the book just to make sure kids and their parents know that. So, the idea, not too many students take advantage of this, but if they should want to, they would just check in with the assistant principal for teaching and learning, just to make sure that they are ready to take on the course load that they're looking to take on. They have someone there to kind of guide them with that. Did I cover the?
The only thing is the ACN itself limits students to 2 courses per semester, but if they were to combine that with the dual enrollment course, then.
It could potentially be more than 2. Yeah. Okay.
Any questions or comments to the high school program of studies?
Thank you. I think we should clarify, remember Jamestown, that, when we talk about coordinating with the middle school, we're also coordinating with Jamestown.
Yeah, and so Jamestown kids also would get credit. I know the test has been, I remember kids taking the same high school exam.
Yeah.
Like when our,
I think there's
Jamestown kids take the
some
Algebra 1
discussions
exam.
before.
Yep.
I
know they've
we're
always
just
taken a
gonna.
high school exam, but the credit part is different.
Yeah.
And those credits are really just for it's just for a graduation requirement. It doesn't really.
Yeah, and generally the students who are going ahead like that.
Right, are gonna keep.
They're not looking to leave early.
Right.
They're looking to take more opportunities for rigorous coursework when they're a senior.
Yeah,
To build that resume. So this allows them to do that.
Right, so then they've got their 4 years of Spanish before
Right,
they're a senior and stuff like that.
Exactly.
Okay.
Okay, unless there are any other questions, I'd ask for a motion to approve item E. Motion, Ms. Hoskins, second. Let's skip this and then we'll do a question. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second, Mr. Jones, and yes, Ms. Bernard.
I was wondering, is there any aspect of the program of studies, by approving it, that we would be committing ourselves budgetarily and not be able to make cuts as we get into the thick of the budget and with a very, very tight budget this budget season?
Good question.
I'm not aware of any.
I mean, it's now an online document, so
You can-
it's not like it needs to be reprinted.
If there is something that's cut that requires some kind of change to program studies, you can do it really at any time.
Or if you can't run a class, I think it would be just like, for example, CCRI, URI, they have a class out there, they end up having 3 people show up, they don't run a class. I think it's the same thing.
And there are more courses listed in our program of study than courses that we actually run. Sometimes courses just, particularly if it's an elective, it may not have enough students to run in a certain year, run the following year, or just not at all. So.
And we do, on our course registration sheets, it does have language on those that says electives are always subject to availability of staffing and enrollments.
I think it's a great program of studies. I'm just concerned about what we face in the next few weeks.
So I appreciate the good dialogue we've had on this document. I say we'll call index for this year and say, I'll be back to talk earth science 10 months from now.
Thanks for the warning.
I still fail to understand why students do not get credit for showing competency. But we can have that discussion in the future.
Okay. Unless there's any other discussion, we have a motion on the table. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Next, for unfinished business, we have the 2017-18 school budget. Anything, Mrs. King? Okay, 2018-2019 school budget and the superintendent's preliminary budget proposed cuts. Dr. Roger.
For those who are catching up with the conversation right now, at our last meeting, I talked about the precarious situation that we are in. The school department is in a position where to do next year what we are currently doing right now, no ads of any kind, would require a 5% increase to our budget. And each half of a percent, or each percent, is about $500,000, because we get in the neighborhood of $50 million from the town. So that's the number that we're looking for as a request to the town for funding. And so, just to roll things over, the laws that we have, and I know Attorney Carroll will talk a little bit about this, state that a town can only levy 4% year to year on their taxpayers, and to go beyond that requires a lot of things to happen, which make it nearly impossible. So we discussed this last time, and the school committee has charged me to come back with a 4% budget. As I mentioned, starting down that road, just doing right now what we, for next year, would be 5%, and then we've been hit with a reassessment of property values around the state and the ability of towns to pay, and that has meant to North Kingstown is one of the losing districts in that reassessment. There are a number that have lost more than we have, but for us, that's in the neighborhood of $550,000. That's another percent. So now the difference between all of that put together and 4% is roughly $1 million. It's $947,833 to be exact. So I wish I could tell everyone that I'm coming into this with, a number of things that I am looking to add. There are a couple of things that I am proposing that we add, but there is so much more that we are looking to reduce, because we just don't have a choice. These are not areas that I prefer to take on. I would prefer that somehow the taxpayers of North Kingstown and elected officials decide that we're going to fully fund beyond 4%, and perhaps there's a possibility of that happening. But in the meantime, to get to a 4% budget, my proposal is as follows. I'll start with elementary level cuts. Some of them are a little easier to handle. For instance, there are 4 teachers at the elementary level that I believe that we can do without, largely because of just year-to-year changes in enrollment at that particular grade, at that particular school. For instance, at Stony Lane this year, we have 4 sections of kindergarten. We generally don't have 4 sections of kindergarten at almost any school. It just happened to be a big cadre this year. So next year we need 3. So that's a teacher that we know we're not going to need next year, and it's a relatively easy thing to do. Now, a teacher is about $76,000 when you look at, the step that the teacher would come in on, and their benefits that they would receive. So there are 4 teachers in that category. I'm also proposing, there's going to be an add back here for Quidnesset, but a reduction, actually a transfer of a TA at Quidnesset, who was a regular classroom TA to a behavioral TA. We currently have one behavioral TA for the entire district and one behavioral teacher for the district, and this would allow Quidnesset to have its own behavioral TA, and the other one could then focus on all of the schools other than Quidnesset. There are 2 part-time TAs at Quidnesset that I'm looking to reduce with this proposal. There's a full-time TA at Forest Park and a full-time TA at Fishing Cove that would be part of this reduction. At the middle level, a lot of the reduced funding or the reductions in staffing come at the middle level. And what we're actually looking to do is to take a 7-period schedule at our middle level and turn it into a 6-period schedule. Currently, students have English, math, social studies, and science, and an additional class in literacy at the middle level. And what would happen is that we would retain the teams at the middle level, particularly at Davisville. At Wickford, the numbers don't quite support the team model as much, but at Davisville, teams would be retained, so a group of kids would share a group of teachers, and those teachers could plan around that particular group of kids and have that much better contact with their parents because those 4 teachers share the students. If the students would need additional support in literacy or math, say, that time would then come from their elective periods. Electives work on kind of a semester basis, and they work on an every other day basis. So you can fit 4 electives at a time. So what would ultimately happen is, considering that a lot of students would still need that additional support for literacy or math, the electives end up being what gets reduced. So at the middle level, we would be reducing our family and consumer science teacher, who is shared between Davisville and Wickford. We would also be reducing by 2 or 1.9, there's a 0.9 PE and health teacher at Wickford and a 1.0 at Davisville that we would be reducing. Now, students would still have PE and health, but it would be a reduced amount of time that they have it. And it's still within, the parameters of what is the minimal requirement by the Department of Education for PE and health. So we're not, going out of, what is recommended by RIDE there. Because the team would now not have that additional literacy teacher, there's basically a literacy teacher at each school, Davisville and Wickford, that would not be needed in this model. Therefore, there would be reductions of that. And there would be 0.4 or 2/5 of a social studies teacher. That's basically 2 sections of social studies that we would need less at Wickford. And at Davisville, because of just a change in the special education population, we see the opportunity to reduce by 1 special education TA at Wickford, at Davisville Middle School, excuse me. The high school, there will be a TA reduction, but that was a budget error from last year, so that's not necessarily something that we actually filled this year, so it's an easy item. At the central office, we are going to reduce 1 maintenance position, or my proposal is to reduce 1 maintenance position. That will slow us down, especially in terms of maintaining our fields in the spring and fall. It's not something we want to do. In every one of these situations, by the way, this is not something I want to do. It is a matter of choices between these options and a lot worse options. And that's, where we have ended up. In terms of additional staff, as I mentioned before, there's a trade-off here. I want to increase at Quidnesset to include a behavioral TA, and I also want to add at North Kingstown High School a social worker. Right now, we have 1 social worker who attends to every student at North Kingstown High School, 1,400 of them, and another 1,000 students between our 2 middle schools. That's 1 social worker for that entire population. That is just unconscionable. We need to do better than that. The issues that affect our kids, their mental and social stability. It is true that we need better support at the elementary level, we also need better support at the high school level. And this is something that has been sorely needed for a long time. The other reductions are lesser. They include reductions in some assistant coaches for softball, baseball, boys lacrosse, and girls lacrosse. That comes up to about $10,000. There are licenses for different instructional programs that we use at savings of about $4,000. We found some phone bill savings that we can put together, some E-rate savings, some technology items. We will reduce our textbook line by about $30,000. We will, I'm not sure what E-plus expenditures are, Mrs. King.
E-plus is just a vendor, and Mr. Waterman had said that he would be able to forego those expenses in next year's budget, so it's just a vendor.
And other, the rest of it is supplies. Not that supplies is an easy item. A lot of people, when they hear supplies, they think of paper and paper clips. It's not necessarily that. In some cases, this could mean, the supplies we need for science kits and that sort of thing. So those are not easy to do without, but right now, that money is relatively little. And in the areas, you may feel like, well, aren't there other areas that you could go to make cuts? And I just want to assure the public that this is my 7th budget, and I had 2 before that as the assistant superintendent. And every one of those years, there's some version of this. This is pretty high. This is as high as it gets for me. But there have been a number of years, for instance, where over and over again we would go to the high school to reduce sections and reduce sections, and other places that couldn't absorb so much. So sports has been affected over the years. Certainly, transportation. We had a fleet of about 28 buses about 10 years ago. Now we have a fleet of 21 buses. So all those, particular areas that people might point to and say, well, can you do with a little bit less here? I assure you, there's been someone looking into that and seeing if that's the case. Now, this budget gets to $947,833 in reductions to have for the school committee to propose a 4% budget to our town council. Attorney Carroll, can you talk a little bit about
Yes.
What the town could do? Is there a limit 4%, or and what would need for the tax levy increase to happen? But also, the town could give us more than 4% as long as they don't increase the levy by more than 4%.
Right, but
Correct?
it's very unlikely and it happens very infrequently.
Right.
Starting in 2013, the General Assembly encouraged or passed a statute that required that all cities and towns in the state not increase their tax levy by more than 4%. Have there been times and are there exceptions where this can be made? Yes. But it would have to be a joint agreement between the town and the school committee, and then there would need to be voter approval. We talked about earlier tonight.
Doesn't it require a supermajority of the town council
Yes,
as well? Yeah.
4/5 majority. So, the chance of that happening is slim to none. We did actually research just tonight that it did happen in Barrington when they built their new high school, their new middle school, and there was an increase, but that goes to the voters. So we would need, quite a change in order for us to be able to get more than the 4%. Now, can a town give a school department more than 4%? Absolutely. If they don't increase their tax levy by 4%, they could give us more than 4%. But again, you would have to get total cooperation between the town council and the school committee to get the additional money.
And just to finish my remarks and put a bookend on this, the budget that I would like to propose, and there are a number of parents here from Quidnesset, would include an assistant principal at Quidnesset Elementary School. I would prefer that to a dean, just because of a dean is considered part of the teachers' union, and I would want this to be a supervisory role. And so there's a little bit of a dynamic in that. I would also want more social workers around the district and more behavioral TAs. We had a long discussion about that a couple of months ago, about the need in this district to increase at every level. And I know a number of the school committee, and myself included, would like to do something about the school start times. Mr. Baker mentioned, about that. Right now, we have the worst school start times in the state of Rhode Island, and they need to be fixed. And I think just about everybody in town would say they would prefer something better than that, but then you get to the question of, well, what is your priority if you have to cut $1 million? What can you touch and what can't you touch? And so that's the position that we're in at the moment, and that is my proposal, and I would expect there'd be a lot of discussion, not only tonight, but in the next few weeks about, where to go with this.
Thank you.
So I just want to remind you all of the schedule. So we have 3 meetings, February 6th, February 13th, and February 20th. The February 20th meeting is where we will be looking for you to make a vote on what is going to the town manager. That will be due to him that following Monday. It's that last Monday, I can't remember the date, I think it's around February 27th. So by close of business, Mr. Mollis needs to receive the budget from the school committee. So February 20th doesn't have to be our last meeting, but it has to be in that week. I need a little bit of time if there are a lot of changes, so that's our schedule. We'll have the budget on every of the next 3 meetings. Certainly it's up to you if you want to have any other meetings, but that's the calendar that we try to stick with.
Thank you. And so just a quick reminder, on 2 things. One is, Dr. Ogier, you've mentioned the reduction in state aid to the tune of about $550,000 this year. One thing that has come up in communications with RIDE was a notification that we had not known, which is that not only is that a reduction to our state aid for $550,000 this year, but it will also be a reduction in our state aid in the same amount next year and the year after. And what that means is that as we have this difficult discussion this year on how we're going to come up with the money to meet the reduction that we have now, we're going to have to dig further next year and then further the year after that. That is, again, as Mrs. King had mentioned, a result of not a change to the funding formula itself, but a reallocation of the state aid money between different cities and towns. They've looked at essentially the wealth of the various communities, and based on those numbers, moved money around. And we are on the losing end of that, and other cities and towns are on the plus end of that. So, this year is just year 1 of, really difficult budget decisions.
And I also do want to add to that is that if there are any enrollment reductions, that number will be even worse. So we're right now, this year is year 7 of the long ago revamped funding formula of a 10-year cycle. And North Kingstown was always a reduction, always a loser in that funding formula revaluation, the whole new way it's calculated. It gets magnified when you get down to year 8, 9, and 10 next year, the year, and the 2 years after, because now we had a town-wide property tax reevaluation. Vision appraisal comes in and does the whole new reevaluation. And according to RIDE, the reason why this is such a big hit is because property values have gone up and median family incomes have gone up. So technically, if we didn't have this 3 years left on the funding formula, we'd be losing $1.6 million next year, period. So that gets spread out over the 3 years. If we have a large decline in enrollment, that will get spread out over only 3 years. So when you were earlier in the formula and you had changes like that, it got spread out over the rest of the 10 years. But now that you're down to the wire, it hurts even more. So just the warning that if we do have a large decrease in enrollment that we find out as of March 1st census, that number's going to be a bigger reduction.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Governor.
Dr. Ogier mentioned the school start time issue. That issue is pretty much $1 million issue. Is that?
We estimated about 2 years ago now, when we did a presentation for the school committee at that time, that we would need roughly 6 or 7 buses and drivers to get to a point where the high school would be start half an hour later, and all of the elementary schools would start in around 8:45 instead of some of them going as late as 9:35 or so that we are now.
It's about $500,000.
Yeah, that'd be about $500,000 item to
And then the other thing I wanted to say is just to sort of remind, I think the members know, but also the public, how the budget process works. This is the point where we start mentioning the importance of dialogue with the town council. And as our attorney had mentioned, and this gets very confusing because there are two 4% numbers that are in play when we're talking about the 4%. One is that the school committee is not allowed by statute to request in our budget more than 4% more in funding than we received last year. And that is the reason that Dr. Auger is presenting what we call a 4% budget right now, which is we are in our budget requesting that the town council give us more than 4% than they had the year before. The town council, even if the town council could choose to give us more than 4%. We can't ask for it, but they could give us more than 4%. But what that then bumps into is what we've explained is what's called the 4% levy cap, which is that the town council cannot extract from the taxpayers of North Kingstown essentially, and please chime in if I
No,
go off the
you're
deep
right.
end.
You're
Okay.
like reading the law.
Cannot extract from the taxpayers of North Kingstown more than 4% in property taxes than they had the year before. If you logically think that through, what that means is that the town can give us more than 4%, but it means that they then have to take it out of any increase to their own budget, okay? So if the town took exactly the same amount as last year, they could take the full 4% tax levy if they chose to, give that money to the school department, which might well end up with us getting more than 4% more than we had the year before. I don't know if anybody followed that, because it gets really complicated, but that's how it all works. So the way the system works is that we present our budget to the town council. This is the superintendent's proposal. We have not yet approved it. We have more work to do over the next couple of weeks to talk about whether we accept the recommendations of the superintendent, whether we want to add, subtract, go deeper, go less, move things around. That is all within our purview. And then by February 20th, you said, at our last meeting in February, we need to send our final budget to the town council.
February 26th is the Monday.
Okay, and that's when they need to receive it. Now, here's the important part now. Even if we were to approve the 4% budget with the reductions that we're seeing here, and this is where you get into, some people will quibble over what's a cut and what is not. We are asking for more money than we did last year. Okay, so even though we are cutting from our budget, we're still asking for more money than we had last year. And that's because each year it becomes more expensive to run the school department for any number of reasons, whether you're looking at health care and benefits, whether you're looking at salary increases, or just the price of paper and books. They go up every year. Even if you were to look at Social Security checks this year, any recipient of Social Security received, I believe it was a 2% cost of living adjustment. I'm not sure on that, but I know they got an increase because things just cost more every year. So we are asking for more, but we still need to cut because we can't do what we did with the same amount of money. The town ultimately takes our budget and says, yeah, you asked for 4, but we are giving you X. That's the important part for the taxpayers of North Kingstown to have a dialogue, and we do as members of the school committee with our town council. Because ultimately it's up to them to decide how much money they're going to give to the North Kingstown School Department. If they choose to give us more than the 4% that we have requested, maybe we can do some of the things that we would like to do, or reduce some of the difficult cuts that we are making or may make based on the superintendent's recommendation. They can also choose to give us less than the 4% that we are requesting. Should they do that, we then will task the superintendent with finding additional reductions wherever they may be. And as Dr. Auger mentioned, he's not comfortable making the recommendations that he's made, but as that number gets tougher, the decisions get tougher and things get more and more dear to people. I'm not looking forward to that discussion if we get there, but that's what ultimately we're doing. So it's important that we talk to our town council members, and I personally have reached out to a number of them, and I will continue to do so to explain that we're in a situation that we haven't been in prior years. This reduction of state aid is not insubstantial. As Dr. Auger mentioned, You know, it's a $550,000 reduction, that amounts to more than 1% of our budget. So, you know, when we're talking about our, you know, our 4% number, a chunk of it's just that. It's not that we're spending more, it's not that we're doing anything different, we're just getting less money from the state. You know, they have the ultimate authority on how much money we get. There are different parts to that process. One is you can reach out to any of your representatives on the town council at any time and speak to them and tell them, you know, what you think is appropriate for the school department to receive. And then there's also a series of public budget hearings that are held by the town. That will be coming up, and I don't have that date for you. Probably don't know off the top of your head.
Well, the actual budget hearing townwide is April 9th,
Okay.
which is the week before school break. It's very early because school break seems a little bit early in April. There's also a meeting, and I don't have the date of that one, in which Dr. Roger and I go, and
Right.
that's a public
The
meeting
department head
also. It's a
meeting.
department head meeting. I don't have the date of that. My guess it'll be somewhere around the week of March 20th is usually about the time frame.
So, but the
it is.
department head meeting, that wouldn't be a public comment time, so.
No, but it is a public meeting
Right,
that
you
people
can
can
watch.
come and attend.
Yeah, and they usually stream that as well.
Yeah.
So really the last ditch attempt to, you know, reach out to the town council members is that public budget hearing in April. But ultimately, we only have so much say, and I've said this at our last meeting and I'll say it again, you know, no matter how difficult these cuts may be or additional reductions that may be coming down, we cannot spend money we do not have, and we cannot run a deficit. So that's why we're at where we are. And I talked a whole lot, so anyone else have anything they want to
I
add?
just want to reiterate that it is a big deal to be going to the town council and letting them know what your concerns are, and especially with this funding cut that we're faced with, and April 9th is too late. So they have town council meetings pretty much every other Monday, and they have public comment at every meeting.
And they have one this Thursday.
So
On the budget.
Just to talk about the budget as a topic, so good meeting to go to.
So I implore people to get to those meetings and express your concerns and your concerns with what they're funding and what they are willing to fund in the school department.
You know, Dr. Roger and I have been saying this for just about every budget, so, and I'm on budget 6, he's on budget 7, that the 4% was gonna run out. You don't really need to be a brain surgeon to know that at some point, the 4% wasn't gonna make it. If you operate a business and you continue to cut your expenses and cut and cut and cut, there's some place where you're not gonna be able to cut anymore. So unfortunately, that year came a little bit sooner because of the tax reevaluation. I think we probably had a couple of more years where, you know, the 4%, we may have had to make some cuts and some adjustments, but this RIDE education number is big. And I also want to say, for people that haven't been around as much, and Dr. Roger and I can put together a laundry list for you of the things that this school department has done just in the time since I started here. And when I first started here was the outsourcing of the custodians. That was a very, very unpopular decision that the school committee had to face, and that saved this district over $1 million. And we have a laundry list of those kind of things that this school department has done over the years that have grown and that have saved substantial money, that if we had not done those things, we'd probably be looking for another $4 million every year for our budget. So, you know, just the health care that we renegotiated with our teachers and with our ESP union, that saved over $1 million as well. I mean, if you look at the trajectory of our healthcare numbers went down dramatically for several years, and they just started to increase again. I don't think you're gonna see too many other districts that had a drop like a rock in healthcare costs. So we have done a lot, and we could come up with that whole list for you. Davisville Academy was another savings, you know, also a very unpopular decision. We were very highly criticized about Davisville Academy. We've done the calculations on that. That's saving the district $700,000 a year instead of outsourcing those students. And terrific, we get to keep them in district. So there are so many things like that that just really end up becoming overlooked when then you have to come to a year where you have to make enormous cuts like this.
Thank you. Anyone else? Mr. Jones?
Yeah, I'll reiterate some of the points you made. I'll talk a little bit to the audience who's here and maybe who's listening, another tack. First, a couple of points because they were brought up in citizens' comments. When the budget gets posted, or right when we post it, or you can look at prior year budgets, there's literally hundreds of pages that you can delve into. And the reason why there's hundreds of pages is because of the transparency of this district. And so when we talk about having a meritorious budget award, that is not mutually exclusive with lack of behavioral supports that may be perceived at schools. In fact, it is done with reduced staffing that we've done in that office. So I think it's a credit to say, with actually less people, that we have one of the most transparent budgets that allow you out there to pour through thousands of lines and come back and say, hey, what about this? Can we cut this? Or why does this look so big? You know, I challenge you, go to other school districts, go to other towns, and see if you can find that level of detail. The second point on the track and field. Track and field is a potentially capital project with a bond. We would never bond for people. It's a structural issue. So again, the fact we may be bonding for a track and field or a complex is not in conflict with whether we need more capabilities in other parts of the district. Same with the fact of reference to being here. The town put 1.3 million, and that's probably not the final number, into the prior school administration building. That's 1.3 million that the school district never got to put into that building. And if we'd gotten $1.3 million, we wouldn't have put it into that building. We would have put it into other capabilities in the thing. And 1.3 million would pay for this lease for about 15 years. So the fact we moved here did not take away from adding capabilities at our schools. In fact, it probably saved a little, because if you had been into 100 Fairway Drive, or 120, what's the high school, 100 Fairway Drive, you realize why the town put 1.3 million into it. So I would just caution, let's you know, we talk about real needs in the district. It's not sort of an, you know, why one thing is done over another, that they could have replaced each other. My other big comment, so if you were very passionate and active, which people here are, thank you for coming, because the fact you come here and speak your voice says a lot. Or if you're listening, we have a governor who claims she's an education governor, but the talk and the walk don't match. The governor's proposed budget increases state aid to education by only $13 million. Over 50% of that is going to charter schools. 4% of the kids getting over $7.5 million. And not even our local charters. So it's going to the urban charters. So $7 million of a $13 million increase going to 4% of the kids. The rest of the 96% of the kids getting $6 million.